I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our presentation on the ethics of self-care. Today's presentation is eligible for 1.5 ethics credits. And directly after the presentation, a survey will pop up and you will just have to fill that out in order to get your CE credit. Usually it takes about 1 to 2 weeks in order to receive that. I am Martha Scarborough. I am Regional Resource Director for Caron Treatment Centers. Caron is a 60-plus-year-old nonprofit substance abuse and co-occurring treatment center. We have residential campuses in Pennsylvania and Florida. And here in Atlanta, we have an outpatient program called Caron Atlanta, and we serve families, teens, and adults that need some support for addiction. And I'm super excited about today's presentation. I can't think of a better time than now to talk about self-care. And I also can't think of 2 better presenters to lead us in this discussion, Leanne Jamison and Katie Myers. I'm going to hand it over to Leanne to introduce herself, and then she'll hand it to Katie. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Martha. So my name is Leanne Jamison. I am an LPC here in Georgia and a CPCS. I have been in the field for about 15 years, and funny, I've worked for Talbot, I've worked for Black Bear, and now I am the director at Caron Atlanta, and I am so proud to be here representing Caron, as well as just with this amazing woman, the CEO of Talbot, Katie Myers. So we're so excited. This is actually, we go way back, and this is a passion for both of us. So I know that it's in my heart, I know it's in Katie's heart, that everybody is here, and we are so excited to present to you why it's important to take care of ourselves, how it's an ethical imperative, right, to take care of ourselves in this helping field, and then being able to just present to you some real-time ways to take care of yourself. So so excited, and again, this is just a great honor that everybody has chosen today to be with us, so thank you. Go for it, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks, Martha, and thanks, Leanne, and welcome everyone. It's an honor truly to be able to talk about this type of topic, especially today. And so I want to give a little preface of this presentation. It was originally created in May, and it was this very real and apropos response to everything going on with COVID, but it also stemmed from, as Leanne mentioned, for years now, I've been creating content and material for clinicians to recenter themselves and to remind themselves that their self-care is as important as anything they do when they're in front of a client or a patient. And so some of this material is woven together from all of that. I updated it for August because back in May, we weren't quite sure if things were gonna last this long, and here we are. So I wanna just kind of bring it full circle into this time being for you, and how can we make the most of the really, really hard, and why we have to do our work in order for us to show up safely for our clients and the people that we serve, the communities that we serve, for them to be able to have the space to do their work. So as Leanne mentioned, I am CEO of Talbot Recovery Campus. I started at Talbot in 2009 as a family therapist, and Leanne and I worked together on the young adult team. So we are trauma bonded. The journey of helping young adults through treatment and into recovery is unlike any other. And so if there's anybody on right now who works with that population, or who can connect with that, know that there will be many times during this presentation I will be speaking directly to you as it relates to your self-care, because that is a wild bunch, and they need us to be our very best and our healthiest so that we can show up for them. That said, I want to just make some acknowledgements. I wavered on the title of COVID showers bring May flowers. I did not want to appear insensitive to anyone, because I know people are losing their lives. Families are being impacted in horrific ways. And I read somewhere that it's been called the largest human experiment of our lifetime. And we don't really know, we're still learning how we're supposed to be doing this thing called life during a pandemic. And so if you are one who on the spectrum of impact you've lost a loved one or you yourself have been ill, or I do not want anything that I'm saying or sharing today to feel as though I'm minimizing that or being invalidating of that. I do know that for the masses, for the majority of us, we are impacted in a way, and we're just trying to figure out how to do that the best that we can. And so wherever you land on the scale, I believe that how we practice our self-care doesn't care whether or not our whole worlds have been rocked or whether or not it makes it annoying to go to dinner. When we show up as helpers, when we show up as clinicians in the field, our job is to do no harm, do the very best that we can, and we can only do that if we're taking care of ourselves. So we're going to focus more on the whys than the whats. The why it's important. This is a very, I think it does get very deep as far as the ethical considerations. And I don't know, I'm gonna try this. This is gonna be the first time. Can you like raise your hand or put in the chat if you know somebody who has practiced in the mental health field in a way that they weren't taking care of themselves, and so it could have bumped up against an unethical type response, either whether it was judgment or boundaries, decision making. And I just want to get a sense of, we've got about 50 participants. We all know someone, we all could potentially have been ourselves, right? Like I should have taken that week off, right? Like I should have done something different to take care of myself, and thank goodness I didn't hurt anybody or respond to something inappropriately.
Yeah, we have a bunch of yeses here, so they can definitely relate.
Okay, so this is important, y'all, to know that one, it doesn't just impact some of us. We all in the human experience are learning about this process. And so let's see, the overview of this is that we often serve traumatized individuals, and we know that this is a traumatizing time, and whether this is capital T trauma or lowercase t trauma, depending on what your experience has been. I love the challenge of how am I going to help someone else get to safety if I cannot get myself there first. And just the reality of how much our awareness and being in tune with ourselves impacts everything. And so you're going to hear that a lot over and over and over again, because you find that as my battery's going low, y'all. This is self-care 101. This is presentation 101. Plug in your computer. I'm gonna do an example, an analogy right this second about self-care. If you don't have yourself plugged in, how on earth are you going to be what you need to be for others? I'm also gonna punt to Leanne while I plug this in, and she is going to do something, a song and a dance.
I would love to be able to do that. And I see one of the comments here with Robert King to compassion fatigue working in a substance abuse facility. So anybody that can relate to that, I know with Katie and I, we both have worked in the substance abuse field for, like I said, you know, I've been in it for 15, 16 years, ever since 2006. So this is a specific, you know, again, if we're looking at just the high pace, high impact, and the high need for giving ourselves to others, right? Those clients, that is so important. And it's just not the substance abuse, it's just my experience, right? And it's in, like we were saying, you know, the community mental health field, social workers, private practice. We've been hearing more and more that there's been a higher acuity since all of this has happened, where people are seeing more difficult situations coming about in private practice that need more care and more just compassion to surround their clients. And how are we able to do that if, you know, if we're running on low too, if our battery's running low and we haven't plugged in yet?
Perfect. Thank you, Leanne. Teamwork makes the dream work. So talking about the COVID showers, more like torrential downpour. And this is a brief and overly simplified overview, but just to get us kind of connected to just some basic realities that if anxiety has been a part of your life, chances are your symptoms have increased. And everything that I'm saying is also in relationship to those that we serve, those who normally if their baseline is anxious, guesses are that they are presenting with increased anxiety as they are coming to you or struggling with whatever's in front of them. If depression has been part of your life, the physical distancing and isolation may make this time more difficult. And also the reality that when I first did this presentation, we were doing this for about 6 weeks, and now we're heading into almost our 6th month of some form of this, right? And so connecting with just the history of any type of trauma, the uncertainty that's coming next with COVID, and the feelings of powerlessness are going to be exacerbated. Chronic illness is going to feel more stressful for you and those that you serve, and unhealthy coping mechanisms may be magnified. And this is really when we start to get into the, of course, being in the field of addiction and treatment and recovery, drinking, smoking, eating, misusing substances, any type of numbing out is an unhealthy coping mechanism. It may work for a second, but it will not last long and it will do more harm than good. And so we've got to be in touch with that to self-correct, auto-correct quickly, because we don't, like we know, we tell our patients and the people that we serve. You guys heard the analogy of addiction where it's like you're a cucumber until you're a pickle. And once you cross the line and become a pickle, you can't go back to being a cucumber. But there's often this like line where it's, I didn't realize I'd crossed the line. And all of a sudden I look back and the line's back there. Self-care is the exact same. We think we're okay, we're plugging along, we're in survival mode. And before we know it, we look back and it's like, oh. So this is your reminder that you're human too. And you and your self-care. I'm going to tell 2 short stories. These are my favorite of all time because I think there's so many parallels that we can use stories like this. So paradoxes and perspectives. There was a man who was in a forest and he was feverishly, sweating, wore out, trying to saw down a tree. And somebody walks up on him and says, "Oh, your saw looks pretty dull. You might want to stop and sharpen it." And the man exclaims, "Can't you see I'm trying to cut down trees? I don't have time to stop and sharpen my saw." And I want everyone for a moment to take a minute, because we've all done it, and think about the last time that you said or thought, "I can't take time off. I don't have time to take lunch. I can't possibly say no to that. I can't leave at 5. I can't not do whatever it is that is right in front of you. I can't stop sawing this tree. That I am utterly ineffective at getting any progress because my saw is so dull that I won't let myself stop to sharpen the saw." And I love this quote by Abe Lincoln. Who knows if this is really by Abe Lincoln? I put maybe because, the internet says whatever the internet says. But if I have 1 hour to cut down a tree, I will spend the first 45 sharpening my saw. We are the saw. And sharpening ourselves is another analogy for self-care. The other story is the story of the Chinese farmer. And this is suspending judgment. This is taking life as it comes and not always knowing the outcome. And so part of, I try to be the Chinese farmer every single day. So for those of you who know this story, I hope you enjoy my version. For those of you who don't, I hope that you are able to connect with and desire what this beautiful Chinese farmer has achieved in his life, because we can all learn a thing or two here. So there was a Chinese farmer, and he was a poor man. He lived on an itty bitty plot of land on the emperor's land, and his job was to plow the emperor's land. That's how he lived. That's how he survived. That was his job. And so one day He is plowing the land, and one of his horses, his only horse, runs away. Everyone from the town runs to him and says, "Oh my gosh, what bad luck you've had. Your only possession, your only thing that was going to allow you to live, gone. What terrible luck." And he said, "Maybe yes, maybe no, we shall see." They're like, "Crazy, he lost his horse and he didn't even know it's bad." The next day, the horse comes back from the wild and brings 10 wild horses with it. And the whole town flocks to the Chinese farmer and says, "Oh my gosh, you're now the richest man in the whole land. Like, you have more than anybody, even the emperor. The emperor doesn't even have 10 horses. This is such great luck." And the emperor says, "Maybe yes, maybe no, we shall see." And the next day, the Chinese farmer's son is trying to break one of the wild horses, and he gets thrown from the horse and breaks his leg. Everyone from the town, you guessed it, they come and there's like, "Oh my gosh, what terrible luck. How on earth are you ever going to make it? Your only living relative, and now he is handicapped and crippled and can't walk, can't help you work the land. And what terrible luck you have walked into." No pun intended, walked into. And he says, "Maybe yes, maybe no, we shall see." Later on that week, the Chinese army is recruiting all young and able-bodied men to go and fight in a war that they will not win. And the son doesn't go. He's not able to because he has a broken leg. And the moral of the story, obviously, is what sometimes looks like is the absolute worst, most devastating, unbelievable, may not be, right? We don't always know what the end of the story is going to be. And so it's not to honor our emotions about when things are rough, that you get bummed out, when things are great, that you can celebrate. It's to remember and have that connection again with yourself, that nothing is over until it's over, right? And COVID is presenting what it's presenting, and there may be a lot of like, "Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world." And trust me, I've said it. This is the worst, as I'm sitting next to my first grader trying to help him do virtual school. This is the worst. I just don't even know. And then I quickly shift and say, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. There might be something, a blessing, a benefit, something on the other side of this. So those are my encouragement stories to keep you aligned and focused. I've asked Leanne if she will guide us in a meditation, because this is what she does the best in the whole world. So Leanne, I'm going to kick it over to you for this.
Thank you. So yes, and I want to emphasize right here, right now, the fact that so many of us, like Katie was saying, it's like, I was actually just talking to another coworker, a peer of mine, where it's like, you look back and you're like, holy crap, where did that like last year go? How did I even take a vacation, right? Did I even what? And it goes by because, again, we're sometimes like just in crisis mode. And especially since January, March, we've been in crisis mode. So just taking that moment of recognizing self-care and self-love, I put those together, although they're different, right? It's one's an action and one's the way that we, how our mindset is. So, and they both support each other, right? So being able to recognize that even though, right, we might not be taking those vacations, or maybe we don't get a vacation or whatever might be happening, to not just throw away self-care and self-love altogether, because you can't get to that moment where you can take a 10-day vacation, right? So being able to look at, how am I implementing the daily care that I need to nourish my soul, my heart, my life, so that I am taking care of myself every single day. It doesn't have to just be at these spurts of moments where, we're sort of conditioned of thinking, well, if I can just make it to my next vacation. Well, what about the 6 months in between, or the 3 months in between? What are you doing on the daily? So meditation is a form that I use to really tap in and realign every single day. There are longer meditations that I do in the morning, and then I do a recentering in the middle, and also an evening meditation. So it's just part of the daily that I know nourishes my soul. And that might not be for everyone, and I encourage you to explore it for yourself. yourself. So I am going to lead us in a meditation, as Katie stated. So wherever you are sitting right now, just allow yourself to be there. All right, and I close my eyes because if not, I'm usually distracted. So if you feel comfortable enough, or if you are in a space where you can, go ahead and close your eyes and just allow yourself to be. And taking a few deep breaths in, feeling the chair that's supporting you and the ground that is supporting you. And as we are taking a few deep breaths in, I want you to imagine roots extending from the base of your spine and the bottoms of your feet. These roots are extending deeper and deeper into Mother Earth, where she is there to support us, nourish us, ground us, connect all of us. And the beautiful and amazing thing about Mother Earth is that she takes all of our energy, all of that dense and dark energy, and she transmutes it and transforms it into beauty and nourishment. So just imagining your roots digging deeper and deeper into Mother Earth. And on your next breath in, I just want you to scan your body from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. And as you scan down, just observing if you're holding on to any tension. It might be a heaviness. There might be tension in your shoulders. That's where I hold a lot of mine. Simply recognizing it, noticing that it's there without judgment, without trying to push it away, just recognizing it and observing it. And now on your next breath, you're going to take your breath and you're going to send it to whatever space you noticed has that denseness, that tension, that dark energy. And I want you to surround it with your breath. And as you exhale, releasing it down your body, down your legs, and through your roots into Mother Earth, where she can transmute and transform it. Remember, that is her specialty. That is showing her love for us. One more deep breath in, surrounding any leftover dense, dark energy, any tension, any frustrations, any anger, any heaviness, and releasing it with our breath down into Mother Earth. And now I want you to actually turn your attention to the area around your heart. Some might consider this your heart chakra. And just noticing if you're holding on to anything that might be blocking your heart from that free flow of love and compassion. And again, just simply noticing it without judgment, just observing. While you're observing that area and that space around your heart, it might be glowing a green or a pink, whatever color comes to you, whatever color you choose. And now just bringing to mind somebody or and it could be an animal too, just somebody that loves you unconditionally and you love unconditionally. It could be someone who is alive or who has passed on. And like I said, it could be an animal. Just bringing them to mind, that unconditional, loving person. And imagine them being there with you, feeling that love. Feeling what it is like to be with this person who has shown you unconditional love. And now imagining this energy that's being exchanged in between you guys. It could be in the figure 8 or an infinity symbol. Just this energy that's going back and forth from their heart to your heart, from you to them. This free flow of compassion and love and warmth. Just allowing it to be this energy that fills up your heart and opens up your heart to all of the love, all of the compassion. We have unlimited capacity for love, compassion, understanding. And this person helps open that up. The energy opens it up and fills our soul. And on your next breath, taking a nice deep breath in, knowing that your heart is full. Sometimes I have people cover their hearts as if they just encapsulate all of that love unconditionally, the compassion. Breathing into your heart, knowing that it is filled. And on your next breath, just allowing yourself to come back to the room. Tapping your feet on the ground, rubbing the tops of your legs. One of my favorites is giving yourself a big hug. And if you hug, rub yourself because that actually releases oxytocin, which makes you feel good. And just taking a big stretch if you feel the need to.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That if anybody was thinking I could really use some time to like meditate and to center myself, but I don't have time because I have work and then I have this webinar and my CEs are due in September, and we got you covered. And
literally takes 5 to 7 minutes.
There's so much. The benefit goes so far. So I encourage anybody who is able to, if you have the ability to write anything down, a brief check-in on how are you feeling right this second. If the words that come to you are renewed and fulfilled and restored, and how beautiful, and let that resonate, right? Like let that just be where you are. If you're not feeling that right now because of all the things, I want us to be able to acknowledge that, be aware of that. And then again, as we kind of go through the rest of our presentation, giving yourself permission and making the time, creating the space. It's not going to happen for us. The fact that we have created this for you in this moment is not the norm. So it is your work. This is your job. This is your work to do. And then I also want you to check in to see if there are any possibilities for different behavior starting today. And the question is, what do I need to be okay? And that can be anything that comes to you. Write it down. And then the next question really is, how willing am I to move forward in a different way, in a healthier way, in a safer way? And your willingness and perspective matter 100% on how you move forward. If it's too big of a task, if those are your thoughts, then that is exactly what it will be. If it is worth your time, effort, and energy to do something different, then that is where your energy will go as well. We'll check back in with some of that.
The beautiful thing is that it is up to us, right? We have that power. We choose how we engage. So that is our responsibility.
100%. And this story right here from Social Work Today, all the social workers in the house, I read this and I was like, oh man, right? Like I connected with this and it felt not good. And I don't want us to get lost in any shame as far as like what we should be doing, right? Like not helpful in this moment. But the question was posed to 10 different people. Do you take enough care of yourself? And the answers that they got were the exact same when they asked people who are not in the helping industry. And they asked the same question to 10 social workers, mental health care providers. And all of the answers were the same as to why they don't. No, we don't. And this is why. And this is the sentence that gets me, is the difference is that social workers and those in the helping profession are trained to know better. And this is where, even if you look at the social worker self-care, the overlooked core competency, as this article was titled, having self-care as a core competency. I've never had a supervisor ask me or assess my core competency as it relates to self-care, not once. And what a shame, because I probably could have used it years ago if somebody had kind of paused and had me reflect on that. So you get that opportunity right now.
So there's a quick question, Katie. Hold on a
Yes.
second. So Jeff was asking, like, what do we do if I can't clearly define what we need to be okay? And Jeff, we're actually going to get into, because he's like, especially when you think you should know, right? So I think, look at that. Perfect divine intervention there, Jeff. We have, what about, I work in the field and I should know better. First of all, don't should on yourself or anyone else, okay? That just leads us down that shame spiral. So I'm going to let Katie take it away. I just wanted you to be aware that that was something up there.
Beautiful. And yeah, the questions are great, guys. Send in questions. Leanne's moderating a lot of that, and I'll pause as much as I need to. And I'm going to do a little plug for the care that Talbot does for medical professionals right now, because this is something that we deal with every single day when it comes to physicians who are abusing drugs or alcohol, and they are sent to treatment. And the first thing that they have to work through is their shame around, I can't talk to anybody about this. No one is going to get it. No one's going to understand. I should know better. Like I teach people these things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Blah, blah, blah is what it really boils down to, because what we're able to teach outwardly does not automatically translate internally if we don't internalize it and do it ourselves. And so this is where the knowing better is a loaded statement, and I don't want us to get lost in the judgment, but I do want us to get in tune with the truth. And if any of these are the questions or the feelings or the sentiments that any of you are connecting with, as far as like, I help people cope with depression, and I can't even do it myself. I can't ask for help. I'm the one, I am the help. I'm embarrassed to go to therapy or a 12-step meeting. I'm struggling, but who can I ask for help from? This is, again, the connection with what is it that you need, and are you willing to go and get it? And sometimes what we need is to be afraid and do it anyway. Be scared and ask for the help anyway. My personal opinion is that every good therapist has a good therapist. So if you are providing therapy and don't have a therapist of your own, now is a great time, because that is where I would guide you to go to work through some of this. Is if you're asking yourself, like, who do I go to? How do I receive this help? Working through that with your own individual therapist is probably one of the safest and best ways for any of us to navigate. And then if it's a 12-step meeting or a treatment program or something, addition, again, it's be afraid and do it anyway. And we're going to talk about why we have to in a minute. When we know better, we can do better. The non-judgmental kind. Self-care, really, we have to reframe in our minds that self-care is a priority and a necessity, not a luxury in the work that we do. And if you get messages from outsiders who are like, oh, it must be nice to take a vacation every quarter, or, oh, it must be nice that you can go to yoga, or that you leave work on time, or it must be nice, that's their stuff, not yours. That is their stuff. And we have to shift from the priority and necessity, just like we would say to our bipolar or schizophrenic patients, your medication is not an option. It is, even when you're feeling good. The reason you feel good is because you're doing that, and so you keep doing it, right? We are no different in that regard. And so we have to shut out those voices and the judgment potentially coming from the outside world to quiet that down. I talk a lot about, and I really could talk about distress, burnout, compassion, fatigue, and secondary trauma in its own training, because there is, and each of them are slightly different, but they all come from this space of I give, I pour into, and I do not have what I need in reserve to be okay afterwards. And so whether it's, the light bulb who's smoke, I don't know if anybody relates to that. If so, call Leanne or myself and we'll get hooked up with some treatment somewhere. But in the gutter, smoking, drinking, and completely burned out, right? The little guy with the desk, I'm too busy for a burnout. Same thing with the sharpening your saw. Always being on empty, the constant demands. And then the challenges of COVID on top of all of that, right? Like I'm supposed to do all of these things and figure out how to do it virtually, and figure out how to do it when I can't go somewhere and give my best friend a hug because COVID, right? And so we find ourselves naturally in this place. COVID right now is exacerbating our need to make sure that we are doing our part. So the parts of compassion, fatigue, and secondary trauma, and I don't know if you guys can or want to in the chat, or let Leanne know, any of you working with those who are, you are directly dealing with trauma. So first responders, anybody who is focused on first responders, those who are working somewhat kind of like the physicians at Talbot, we hear a lot of really horrible things, and compartmentalizing that and having our own secondary trauma as a result of it requires us to do things differently so that we remain okay. So I'm just curious if there are those who are dealing directly with the trauma, because I'd probably have an additional conversation with you if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, we have somebody that works with PAs and RNs here.
Okay. Yep, absolutely. There was who worked with oncology. There was an oncology social worker. We are face to face with, you guys, we have one of the biggest, if you are practicing in the field, if you are face to face with human beings or systems that are to help human beings, we have the luxury of holding space for people on some of their worst days. Who holds space for you? If you cannot instantly in your mind think of what it looks like and who or how space is held for you, that's your next therapy session topic. We do not have, again, in order for us to be the container for people on their worst, hardest, most broken days, we have to acknowledge our humanity and our potential for burnout. We talk about burnout being emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, decreased sense of accomplishment, even though that might not be what facts would say, rigidity, irritability, right? Needing to have control over something. And I relate so much to this. I even said it in an email to Leanne and Martha about this presentation. I'm a control freak, so I'd really like to have access to the slides. And there's a part of like, there's rigidity. I can see it coming in. The only reason I can see it coming in and I know I can do something about it is because I'm in tune with it. And it's not like a runaway train. We also need to acknowledge high suicide rates. There's going to be a slide here in a little bit about just the reality of suicidality within the helping profession, specifically with physicians. But I want us to kind of look at this slide and, again, an honest check-in. Anything that's standing out, write it down. hypervigilance, relationship problems at home. You know, conflict in the home right now is increased as we are home more with one another. Acknowledge it, write it down, and then call your therapist or your new therapist to talk about that. Compassion fatigue. We work in an industry in the field that not everyone's going to get better. And for a social worker, when I first started, like that just wasn't even a possibility. There was just so much hope and so much, right? And not to say that the world has gotten darker, but there's a new connection with not everybody will get better. We carry that often when we don't have appropriate boundaries. We carry that when we're not able to separate or distance ourselves or take time away from. And then the decision fatigue, shout out to everyone who just cannot make another decision. If you are one who is decisions all day long, and then you get home and you're like, very transparent, I'll tell you, my husband, I will be making no more decisions tonight. What we eat, what we do, where we go, no more decisions. Because I'm decision fatigued. I cannot carry the mental and emotional weight of another decision. And parents are increasingly feeling that with school returning with COVID and homeschool, virtual school, back to school. So just acknowledging these pieces and that what we're experiencing right now is going to enhance all of it. Mental health and suicide. This data is from 2015. Suicide takes the lives of over 38,000 Americans every year. Physician suicide is, I put this in because Talbot focuses on treating physicians, but we know that they are at a higher rate for suicide. But we also know that those of us in the helping industry, I can't remember the statistic, and I won't make up a number, but there was a study done several years ago that suicide within social workers. And I would love to see the follow-up study because they were doing kind of a longitudinal as part of what they were reporting and follow-up numbers. But yeah, we just have to be very real. Depression affects 20 to 25% of Americans age 18 and older in any given year. I would bet the numbers that are going to come back from COVID-19 for the year 2020 are going to be double that, if not triple that. And so what we also know about unhealthy coping skills is that overdose is the most common cause of death. We've got to figure out a different way before that line gets crossed, and our self-care is how we do that. So this is where we kind of get into the self-care as an ethical imperative, which basically means we don't have a choice. And I mean this in a, self-care is a critical prerequisite for competent patient care. If we, again, it's a core competency, we talked about that earlier slide. The prerequisite for competent patient care means that I am capable and I am doing so in an ethical and in a way that is, we've got to get away from like, I'm just doing the best I can when it comes to this. I'm just doing the best I can is great when I'm vacuuming my house. I am not doing the best I can if I am not competent to give patient care. It is not a personal matter. It has nothing to do with me personally. It is an ethical, moral imperative. We have to be proactive in this case, and I'm going to share a couple more. So we get into some of the codes of ethics, and I don't know how many of you have read up on your codes of ethics recently, whether you are an LPC, LCSW, MFT, CADC, whatever your thing is. And I actually have all of this in this presentation, and so I'm pretty sure I can get with Martha or Leanne to get this presentation sent out so you guys can all have access to. But I've gone through and I've looked at every single code of ethics related to those of us in the helping profession. And not every mental health profession has a code of ethics provision for self-care. But for those of us, I think the majority of us on the call, we do. And so I picked out some highlights or just some phrases that kind of remind us like, oh yeah, they do say this is a must. You can't have sex with your clients. You can't be a felon. You can't do other unethical things. and you can't not take care of yourself. And that's how we need to start to frame the way we look at this. I wouldn't have sex with a client, so I also wouldn't not take care of myself. When psychologists become aware of personal problems that may interfere with their performing work-related duties adequately, they take appropriate measures such as obtaining professional consultation or assistance, determine whether they should limit, suspend, or terminate their work-related duties. That scares us so much. And we do things when we're scared. We can be brave and scared at the same time and do the right thing. And so we cannot allow for our lack of self-care to impede or impact negatively, interfere with our abilities to help our patients and clients. NASW, it's in section 4.05, impairment should not allow for personal problems, psychosocial distress, legal problems, substance abuse, or mental health difficulties to interfere with their professional judgment. AAMFT in sections 3.3 and 5.3.10, seeking appropriate professional care, or professional assistance for issues that may impair work, performance, or clinical judgment. Implement a personal program to maintain professional competence. LPCA talks about it in Rule 135-7-.01, and on and on and on. The NCC, the Abracadabra folks, the American Counseling Association, everyone has a statement or statements that talk about this being important. At the end of the day, we get to choose our discomfort. I'll just say I find it incredibly difficult to ask for help. But you know what else I find incredibly difficult? Not being able to function, or worrying that I might be making decisions that are not based in good judgment because I'm not taking good care of myself. And so there's discomfort no matter where you decide to look at this. And so we get to choose. We can either set our boundaries, we can say no to others, which is often a yes to ourselves. We can allow others to step up or help in certain situations. If anybody right now is thinking, well, but if I don't do it, it won't get done. Or if I don't do it, it won't get done right. You should jot that down and let that be your next topic for your next therapy session, because you do not have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Matter of fact, you can't and you shouldn't. We can choose to admit when we need help, appearing selfish with our time. And this is where, and I don't know how much time we're going to have for it, but Leanne and I were talking about like this loving kindness meditation around self-love, right? And the difference between self-care and self-love. But I believe that in order to stay committed to your self-care, the elements of self-love and compassion with yourself are required in order to stick with it. Because there will be times when you say, look, all these other people don't get to do all these things to take care of themselves. Why should I? I'm not worthy of doing that. What if I disappoint someone? What if I look selfish? What if I just look like I'm going rogue and nobody gets it? To that I say huzzah and embrace it, because we don't want to be doing what the rest of the world is doing. We need to be okay to help the rest of the world when they're done doing what they're doing so that they can be okay too. So you can choose that discomfort because it can be and will be, and I connect with that deeply. The other side of it though, if we're not taking care of ourselves, is what I often hear clients talk about, patients talk about, and some things I've experienced as well. Praying for the day to end, losing sleep, headaches and physical ailments, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, suicidal behavior, hurting someone due to my negligence, losing hope. Those are all very real possibilities on the other side if we're not taking care of ourselves. There's a lot of pressure right now. This was a lot of May time, the COVID showers bring May flowers, with how people are trying to, your whole house should be renovated by now, right? Because everyone's had so much time at home, and all those projects should be done because and making the most of this time. I would like to shift that and making the most of whatever gift of time is given to you and focusing on you. Focusing on what your needs are, focusing on what you are lacking, what you would like more of, what you ache for, what you need to nurture yourself. And this is really key. I nurture myself so that I can nurture others. And if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Having compassion for everyone else and forgetting about yourself can veer into the victim martyr, woe is me territory. Not always, but sometimes. And we sign up for everything. We sign up for everything that we engage in. When I go to work, if I complain about work, guess what? I co-sign that because I showed up. If I complain about the state of my house or whatever is going on around me, I am part of that. And we talk about this in recovery too. If we're not part of the solution, then there is no problem. And self-care is the solution to so many of our problems, real and perceived. Two things that we can choose to give freely today is grace and hope. Those who are serving and to those who don't understand. I have some folks in my life who roll their eyes every time I mention something that's either like energy clearing or yoga or meditation. And I used to be offended by it, but now I extend grace. My hope is that they'll see something in me, kind of like the program of recovery, 12-step program. It's a program of attraction, not promotion. And we are attracted to people who are, we're attracted to people who are doing and having gifts and things that we want, that we see that we would like to have and be. And I've never, not once sat in front of somebody who was complaining and who was talking about all the reasons they couldn't do or all the reasons that the world was harder for them. And not once did I ever say, oh my gosh, I want to be just like that. And so extending the grace and the hope that others will catch on, even if they're not, even if they're vocal against you. It's not even for them, it's for us. It's a lot like forgiveness. If it benefits them, great. If not, that's okay too. I'm gonna shift into, because I'm aware of time, I have a bunch of cheesy stories. So if you're worried about, oh my gosh, don't skip slides. A lot of these are cheesy, but they're so true. Stories about coming through hard stuff, diamonds. Anybody not know where diamonds come from? Go research diamonds and the pressure, the intense pressure that it required to make a diamond. Butterflies. Anybody feel like goo right now? There's like a pile of goo, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can keep on. The reality is that some of the most beautiful transitions, just like the butterfly, happen because there's been an undoing, but not the kind of undoing where the caterpillar said, I got to skip the cocoon because I'm too busy. But the kind of undoing where we acknowledge, this is hard, I need to do something different, and that's okay. And then of course our lotus flower, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but take a look. I'm going to let Leanne, and actually real quick, I apologize. Yep, we're there. Leanne's going to do another meditation, and I beg of you, if you were one during the first one that you were like, oh, this is a great time to check email, or maybe you've been checking email the whole time. I don't fault you for that. I love to multitask too. I beg of you in this moment, right now, allow Leanne to guide us in another meditation and show up for you. Whether you showed up today because it was a 1.5 credit for your CEs and all of our stuff is due next month, and it's like the race is on, TikTok, get your credits. Regardless of why you showed up today, I ask and beg of you that you show up in this moment for you and allow Leanne to guide us through this next meditation and see what happens, see what comes up. Leanne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. I was actually just looking at one of my like daily affirmation books. It's actually Affirmations for the Inner Child. And I opened up to this page, and it's not for today, but I opened up to it. So I'm actually going to read it because I find that it's very fitting for today. And like, as Katie was talking about the different behaviors of self-love, or, you know, I think it was the last slide. I can't remember. I was going to say something about it and then I stopped, but it was a lot about just like the way that we talk to ourselves. That's what was coming up for me, right? And I think it was Jeff that had mentioned it of like the shoulds and things, and we sort of touched on that. And I remember hearing this podcast that I absolutely loved. It was about the way that we talk to ourselves, our inner critic. And I remember them saying, like, if you could actually take that chatter that goes on in your mind about the things that you should be doing, or that you could be doing better at, and all of these different ways that we put pressure on ourselves and those expectations, being able to identify, like, if I take that and I put that person right next to me, if I make it an actual person and put it next to me, how long would I actually sit with that person? You know, and it really, like, it just resonated with me, because again, I'm a very visual person. So if I actually imagine myself just like sitting and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like some days I'm like, yeah, I really like this chick, right? I can spend all day with her. And then other days I'm like, maybe not so much. And then other days it's like, I don't want to be with you at all. So just about being able to identify, how am I talking to myself? Because a lot of times we think about self-care as this action. And like I said in the beginning, it is an action. And then there's the self-love component. As we're moving through the actions, how are we loving ourselves through that? So there was this reading that I just, how fitting, it's about pressure. It says, I will take the pressure off myself. Do more, accomplish more. These messages from my childhood have driven me all my life. As a child, I could never do enough or to please my parents. The standards were set always higher than I had already achieved. The core of these messages was that I wasn't good enough as I was. I had to do more, be more acceptable. Yet no one is standing over me demanding that I do more. Now the pressure that I'm under is pressure that I am putting on myself. Today I will break the vicious cycle before I blow like an engine of a race car pushed far beyond its limits. I will reassure my inner child that she or he is just wonderful the way that she or he is. She has nothing, this was made from a woman, sorry guys. She has nothing to prove to anyone any longer. Today I will take the pressure off myself and experience the wonderful freedom of being human, not a machine. Right? So I just thought that was super fitting. That was not planned or intended. I had a different meditation that I actually, if we do have enough time, I would love to actually tap into, because it goes right along with this. It truly does. But just like being able to take the pressure off of myself. How often do we tap into what our thoughts are saying to us? What we are saying to ourselves? Is a lot of times we weren't, well, actually the majority of the time we were not born with those, right? We were conditioned to believe what we should be doing, what the expectations are. And again, sometimes it can be helpful. A lot of times it can be hurtful. So it's just about tapping into what is it that I'm saying to myself and how is it impacting me and my overall well-being. So, I don't know if we still have time for the meditation, but I totally wanted to share that. It was absolutely off the cuff, where I was just like, I'm just going to pick this up for a second.
Well, I mean, for those who, the spiritual side and the energetic side of so much of this is how somebody needed that message, right? Somebody needed that message. Maybe all of us needed that message. And so thank you for being the conduit to voicing that to whomever. Thank you for voicing that so that I could hear it. I do think we have time for meditation. I do want to leave time for some more comments and questions. And then there's also a section on ethical dilemmas when it comes to self-care, because it's not always super easy to know. But let's do your meditation.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead and move into that, since I gave everybody a little piece of take the pressure off and be kind to yourself. Go ahead and go into this, and then it would be a nice way to maybe wrap up after the questions.
Perfect. Teamwork makes the dream work. So I like to go into, there's all the different sides of it and the things that we can do today, because I know that the journey of the self-love is, it is a journey, reframing and reprogramming messages that you've heard your whole life. That takes time. And so you may not be able to jump to self-love today, but you might be able to request some time off today. You might be able to ask your supervisor for some help or to do some supervision around your self-care practices, setting some boundaries, saying no. If you're always the one that volunteers for the extra shift, and you're just so tired, right? Like, you're just so tired. It's okay to do something different this time. And so these are some actions that you can take today. And the one that stands out as we kind of pivot slightly to some of the ethical dilemmas is this setting boundaries and saying no. Leanne, you got some?
I do, actually. This really resonated with me too, which is like, whatever I think, when I'm saying yes to something, I'm always saying no to something else, right? So being very intentional about what am I saying yes to and what is that taking away from? So if I'm saying yes to an extra shift, I'm saying no to extra family time. If I'm saying yes to an extra shift, I might be saying no to like an extra long bath or maybe time with friends. So it was really helpful for me to put it in that sort of framework of just like, if I'm going to say yes to this, what am I saying no to? If I'm saying no to something, what am I saying yes to? I'm saying no to this extra shift so I can fill my soul with, a drive-in movie. That's what we're planning on this weekend. So like, that's what came to mind. So again, it's just like that helps with that like mindset for me. It's a lot about the mindset shifts. And like Katie, what you were saying is just like taking that brave action while being fearful of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to say no to my boss, or I'm going to say no to drawing a boundary with a client or something like that, or a peer, in order to fill my cup, right, and fill my soul with something else. And it can be scary, especially when we're just starting. And then you'll find out that you don't spontaneously combust or fall into a puddle on the floor when you have boundaries. So
thank you for that. And that's a perfect visualization even in my head of like there's going to be some trade-off, right? Like there's discomfort in choosing to take care of yourself or to not. There's discomfort in saying no. There's this beauty of saying yes in these other ways. And I want to go back to the dilemma potentially of saying no to your boss. So as a boss, and this is always very surprising and difficult conversations we create space for those difficult conversations, because I'm going to be very candid with anybody on here who has a license. If you are struggling with, oh my gosh, I have to do too much and it's not safe and whatever it is, but I feel like I have to say yes. There's either a perfectionistic thread that's woven through you, or ego, or whatever. People pleasing for your boss. When you say yes to X, Y, or Z, and if you yourself find yourself in trouble, it is your license, not your boss's. It is your license, not the organization you work for. It is your license. And so connecting with how important is it? And I mean, those are kind of extreme examples, right? Because we're talking engaging in something unethical or having poor judgment or having poor boundaries around something. While it absolutely can lead to real situations where people get in trouble, where we as clinicians get in trouble, we have to balance, and it's the integrity and the ethical consideration of, I might be saying yes to make someone really, really happy, and I really want my boss to like me, and I can't lose my job because of X, Y, Z. And we've all been there. And the greater risk is putting your license in a position to where it could be questioned, denied, revoked. whatever that is. And so, but I will also say, if you are not doing regular self-care along the way, when your boss asks you for that extra thing, or can you stay late, can you cover that additional group, even though it goes until 9 o'clock tonight, and I know you've been here since 7, but can you do it anyway? When you're not connected with your own self-care, the automatic response, whatever that is for you, will come out. Mine is always yes. I would love to do that for you. And there's no good in extending yourself in that way when it leads to burnout, increased depression, anxiety, compassion fatigue. I was able to look at a couple of the comments about the substance abuse arena and the compassion fatigue, wanting so badly for others what they don't yet know that they could want for themselves. If we are not in tune with our self-care, we will not know when those moments come up to know that we're making the uh-oh decision or the that's uncomfortable, but I'm going to say no decision.
Can I add one thing in? So being able to be in tune, like you were saying, is so key. And I know you brought up like, take it to your therapist, take it to your therapist. That's something that I have been told since, I think, undergrad, right? Every good therapist has their own therapist to be able to be aware of these internal difficulties and shifts, right? If I'm acting out of like my conditioned self of I want to achieve, I want to please, I want to, it's that external validation because I'm not filling it up myself. That's that self-love too, right? So if I'm not aware of those things because I'm too tired, because I've been extending myself, overextending myself, I mean, all of the self-care, and that's where self-care and self-love like hinge on each other. If I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not aware of how I may be acting out of my conditioned self of just wanting to externally people please, and hoping that that'll fill me up. And it does maybe just for a little bit, right? And then it just goes into that downward spiral. It's that immediate gratification, long-term consequences. So I just wanted to bring that up of like that awareness and how they both fit into each other.
I love that. Thank you. The rest of our slides are the very specific, talking about impairment of ourselves, impairment of colleagues. I do spend a minute talking about when you know that you have a colleague who is engaging in any type of behavior, or, and my example is a hard one because it's a real one, but their situation where individuals knew that there was a physician who was impaired. And we hear this a lot with the patients who come in to tell that, right? Like because they've gotten in trouble, they've diverted medications, they've gotten caught with something, they've whatever. And the entire team around this one particular physician knew that he was using. And nobody said anything. And after everything had kind of come out, the conversation was, you know, why didn't you, what kept you from feeling safe? What kept you from speaking up? And there was almost an oblivion in half of the people who were interviewed about the situation. Thank God no one died as a result of this physician practicing impaired. But they said that, well, he's the physician. I don't have any right or ability, or that's my boss. I can't say that because that's my boss. I can, you know, right? For especially the NASW, and I also believe there might be a slide for, anyway, there are lots and lots of information in here. But the impairment of colleagues, or the knowing or belief that someone is struggling and staying quiet, is as much a part of our self-care for our industry as it is for any one individual person or the clients or patients that will be impacted potentially. And so there are lots of ways to do that. Starting off with conversations of, hey, I'm worried about you. And I'm seeing this and I'm not comfortable with this, and I'm gonna ask for some guidance on how to handle it. And those are so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. And you know what else is also uncomfortable? Sitting on the other side of something, knowing that someone was impaired or not doing well, having a negative outcome, and knowing that you held on to some of that information. And so again, it is a choice of you choose your discomfort. And there are anonymous ways to do things. There are support set up within most of our organizations that allow us to call and have like hypothetical question asking, right? So that we can get some feedback and understand kind of what we would do or need to do or be required to do. But there really should be like a mandated reporting clause in here about that. And it says it in so many words, but if we know that someone is having a problem or struggling and we're sitting back and allowing them to go out and see patients or see clients, then we are part of the problem. So I'm not going to go through each of these slides in detail because, like I said, there's a ton of more very specific clinical supervision, though I will point out, when I was receiving clinical supervision, it was never once talked to me about my self-care. Like there was never a moment of, it was always external. Like it was always what to do with, and we talked about transference and we talked about some of that, but it was never about like my own self-care. When I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this should be a part of everyone's regular supervision. If you are receiving supervision, whether you're associate licensed or fully licensed, this should be a part of the conversation. I'm going to decide about competence.
While you're looking at these, I want to identify too some really cool aspects of leaning in on your peers. You know, if it's a really, like, what came to mind was, I know when Katie and I worked together eons ago, where I remember, you know, times where we would talk and I would say, you know, I really need help on like getting out of here at a certain time, or like I need help with some of the boundaries that I have with my clients, and being able to lean on my peers to be like, they'll swing by and be like, hey, how are you doing? Right? It's that sort of like accountability and leaning on each other. And I was talking to my supervisor and of course my clinical supervisor, right? But just like utilizing all of the resources around you and checking in on each other. It's so huge. Like think about your work family that you spend all of your time with. And really, I mean, it's a beautiful thing when you can utilize each other and hold each other accountable of just like, why are you here at 8 o'clock at night? And sitting down until they get up and leave with them. Because a lot of times it's like, well, why are you here at 8 o'clock? Right?
You both leave together. You both leave together at the same time.
Exactly.
It is. I mean, and that's the iron sharpens iron, or the time of like sharpening our saws is with each other. And if you don't have that, one, I think there are lots of environments who don't have that. There are also a lot of environments that you can connect yourself with within the industry that provide just really great support for those who are in the profession, but not necessarily connected to your organization. But I again implore you to look into what those things are and to seek it out, because it's our job. I'm in an environment where I'm able to say, if you take time off and I hear from you while you are on PTO, if you check your email, if you respond to something while you are off work, you get a coaching form written in your HR file about self-care. That's how seriously I take it. And it kills people. I mean, it kills people. And hopefully the greater good, and we have shifted the needle. We have a lot of people who are so very dedicated and sometimes they just can't help themselves. But the reality is we have to confront that behavior, because the more that we are part of an environment where the behavior is just so normal, like, well, everybody works 80-hour weeks. Everybody works when they're off. We have to be the change. We have to be the impetus for making that change, and then make some decisions that those environments may not be the environments for you. Again, hard, uncomfortable, but the alternative is harder and more uncomfortable. I pulled up the chat and I wanted to see if there were any ethical dilemmas. I've done this presentation before, and there's always some sort of like ethical dilemma around something. I wanted to give a few moments to maybe dig into some of that, because again, the reason they're called ethical dilemmas is because there's not always an easy right or wrong. But I wanted to see, does anybody have anything or any questions, feedback. I've historically gotten the question of what if your boss doesn't believe in self-care? And to which I would say, find a new boss. And again, that is so easy for me to say sitting in, right? Like that is so easy for me to say. So hard for someone to make the decision that their quality of life is more important than the comfort of whatever it is that is keeping them there. And it is not my place to tell anyone to leave their jobs or to do whatever, but it is 100% my place to remind us that our self-care is just as important as helping the patient who calls in and says they're suicidal. It is just as important as not having sex with your clients. It is just as important as getting all of your CEs for your renewal for your license so that you can stay in practice. We have to make that a priority. Any questions? I love that David said that no can be a complete sentence. I love that. Maybe now would be a good time, Leanne, to end on a, well, just real quick, anybody else?
Last week
Okay. Last week I did dared. Conversation with my boss. Can everybody see the chat? Should we read it?
I can read it. So last week I had, thank you, Jeff. Last week I had to dare to have a self-care conversation with my boss. I was fearful that there would be a negative blowback, but he ended up being very supportive and gracious. That is wonderful. And I think that too is just like Katie was saying is, you know, the needle is shifting, right? It is up to all of us to help that shift. And taking that really, what we deem as dangerous, right? Conversations of like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure how this is going to go across or come across. I don't know how this is going to go, and doing it anyway, right? Yeah, he said, be afraid and do it anyway, right? Being able to recognize and embrace that fear, because our fear is telling us something. All emotions give us, it's telling us something. They're there for a reason. It's communicating to us. And sometimes it's about recognizing when it's coming up against our values. It's like, wait a minute, I know that, something's off here. And it's your choice of whether or not you take that on. And Jeff, I'm so happy that you did, because now you have a point of reference to say, oh my gosh, I did this and it turned out. And regardless of how it turned out, I'm so grateful that your boss, was able to take that information. But regardless, you did that because you knew that it was important. And that's the shift that we need, because I know, when I feel like when I was coming into this and even before into this field, it was just that expectation of like, you work 80-hour work weeks. You put the client first. You signed up for this, right? You are on call. You do have to make sure. And how am I going to make sure, that I'm doing the right and ethical thing, that doing the best for my client, if I am running on 2 or 3 hours of sleep, if I am not, filling my cup up in other areas with family and fun and laughter and love and spirituality, how am I giving that to somebody when I don't have it, right? So I'm so glad you had that experience, Jeff. That's so beautiful.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing that, and thank you, Leanne, for that. It's something I used to tell families in workshops, family addiction treatment, family workshop, families who come who they have loved ones in treatment. And I would say, the hard conversations are the ones that you almost feel like you're going to die or catch fire if you engage in that. Like, it's just so uncomfortable. And my promise to you, and I promise them as well, I promise you that engaging in hard conversations, you will never die or catch fire. Like, those are the worst possible outcomes, right? Dying or catching fire, at least in my head, those are the worst. And I can assure you that when you start to engage in your own self-care and you're stepping back and looking at ethical considerations around how you are maneuvering through this time in our lives, our profession, and the people that we are trying to show up for, you will not die nor catch fire as part of the discomfort of going into that. And I promise you, you will be better for it. And every day that you are better for doing whatever the hard thing was, your clients, your patients, your community, your agency, your group is better off too. So let's end with, oh, we got something coming in.
Yeah, well, hold on a second, because I want to make sure that we leave them time to do the eval too.
Yeah.
So there was that. I don't think there was anything else that came through.
Okay.
And there was something that I did want to touch on too, because we have a nice variety of people here where it's like private practice or working in a facility, working in mental health, in the community. And for every, you know, if I think about them as like different, like just different levels, right? And just, there's just an array of different, I don't want to say expectations, but there are some, you know, it's just like different ways that you're pulled. So something that one of my mentors said to me when I was just like, oh my gosh, like my schedule is so full, right? And I'm the boss at my facility. And she was just like, who makes your schedule? I was like, well, shoot. That would be me. That would be me. So just being able to, for those bosses out there that are on here, you know, being able to identify is like, well, I do create my schedule. Yes, I want to be cognizant and aware of like how I'm feeling that time. And again, it's, oh, I do that. And for those of you in private practice, same thing. It's like, are you leaving yourself enough time for that moment of self-care in between? I know for me, sometimes I've struggled with like, well, I go back to back and like, maybe I'll like get a bathroom break, you know, here and there. So are you leaving yourself enough time just to recenter? It was interesting. I read something where it was just like, you are actually more productive if you take a break anywhere between 60 to 90 minutes. Your productivity like shoots up. I can't even remember the percentage, but I was like, oh, dang. Like, okay, so I get up and I move around, especially now that we're like in front of computers day in and day out, most of us. And being able to delegate. So I'm a certified supervisor as well. So with my supervisees that work in a bunch of different, you know, areas and arenas, as far as like I have private practice, I have crisis intervention, ER, like all of these different places where we talk about, I'm glad that you brought that up, Katie. Like I make it a point to talk about self-care. What are you doing for yourself? How do you're working with high acuity people. How are you engaging in it? They're like, well, I have a vacation in, you know, 3 months. I'm like, no, that's not good enough. You know?
It's not. We've got to change the narrative of what we think is okay. And even hearing you say, it used to be like a bragging thing of, oh my gosh, I've got 12 sessions back to back today. And people would be like, oh my gosh, how do you do it? And it's just, why, what?
It's that external validation.
External, like that is not a compliment. When people are praising you for how much you are doing, that should be a red flag, not a moment of boosted ego.
Absolutely.
Do I do it all? I haven't talked to my kids in weeks, and my house is a wreck, and I have no idea when my car registration is due, and my battery on my computer goes out when those things. That's how I do it all. Don't be that person.
And be compassionate with yourself as you notice, right? As we ebb and flow. Just like, oh wait, I did, you know, fill my plate up a little too much today. Oh, I also talk about delegation. Anywhere along that continuum, you are able to delegate, right? Even if it's just one small task. I said, well, why do you have to be that person to do it? Is there, like, out of pure curiosity, is there anyone else? And this isn't about a hierarchy or anything like that. It's just about asking, like you said, for the help, right? Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's not a weakness. That's a courageous action that shows that you rely on your team and you count on your team and you trust your team and the people around you, and you trust in yourself to be able to ask that. So I will get off my soapbox.
I'm so grateful for everyone who joined. Thank you, Leanne. Doing this, being asked by you and Caron to co-present and to talk about something that I'm super, super passionate about. I see one more new message. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you to everyone I don't know how we communicate stuff after this, but y'all can have my email address or my contact information if you ever have questions, especially if you're bumping up against something where you're not quite sure how to navigate or what the next step is. I may not know either, but sometimes that feels good to know that others are unknowing with you. You're never alone, right? So I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Martha. And I do encourage you to do, as you exit kind of this space, do some deep breathing and just allow for whatever's coming to you, honor that. And then whatever's not working for you, let it go.
Release what is no longer serving you. Thank you so much, Katie. I am so honored that you took this time with us. Thank you. Take it away, Martha. We'll be quiet.
Thanks, everyone, for your time, and thank you both. That was just what I needed, and I'm sure just what everyone else needed. Just as a reminder, as you log off, you'll see the evaluation populate on your screen, and you can fill that out, and that's how we'll get your CE to you. And I'll also follow up with each of you and connect all of us, send you over Katie's information if you need to connect with her as well. And we recorded today's presentation, so we will share that link with you. But hope everyone has a great weekend, and thanks so much.